Emily had always been the kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to be respected. Calm eyes, composed posture, and a quiet strength that seemed to fill every room she entered. She was a little over 50, lived in New York, and had dedicated many years of her life to the same technology corporation located near Manhattan's financial district, in one of those imposing glass towers that shine under the morning sun and make people believe everything inside is powerful and perfect. She wasn't just another employee. Emily was the mind behind one of the company's most important security systems, a project designed to protect highly sensitive information. While many people cared only about profits, prestige, or public image, she cared about responsibility and consequences. Working correctly meant protecting people, institutions, and trust. By her side were a few who truly admired her, like Michael, a brilliant but quiet engineer who trusted her more than anyone else, and Sarah, a younger analyst who saw Emily as the definition of integrity and competence. For years, the routine seemed stable. Emily arrived early, greeted everyone with courtesy, went to her spacious office overlooking the Hudson River, and worked for hours with patience and precision. The company valued her deeply. At least, that was what she believed. Until everything began to change. The company announced a leadership shift. The previous vice president retired, and a new executive stepped in, Daniel. Perfect suit, confident smile, charming speeches about innovation, fresh vision, and modern leadership. He spoke beautifully, maybe too beautifully. At first, Emily tried to believe it was just another adjustment period. Every company changes, she told herself. But slowly, she started noticing small signs that something wasn't right. Meetings became more about impressing people than solving real problems. Technical discussions were replaced with flashy presentations. What once required caution and depth was now treated like a stage performance. Daniel looked at her differently, not as a pillar of the project, but as someone old school, too serious, too expensive, and inconvenient for his plans. One morning, Emily arrived as always. She walked through the lobby, nodded politely, swiped her badge at the turnstile, and it didn't work. She tried again. Nothing. A young security guard, uncomfortable and apologetic, asked her to sign in as a visitor. That simple instruction hit Emily like an invisible punch. It wasn't just a technical issue. It was humiliation wrapped in politeness. When she finally reached her floor, the shock grew heavier. Her office was gone, empty, rearranged. They were turning it into a client-friendly meeting room, something elegant and visually impressive. Her belongings had been moved to a small cubicle near the hallway, close to the restrooms, far away from decision-making spaces. A gray, cold place without windows. A place where the company puts people it no longer wants to acknowledge. Emily stood there for a moment, breathing slowly. She didn't scream. She didn't cause a scene. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was the silence of someone who understands exactly when something serious has begun. In that moment, she realized this wasn't a casual mistake or a random administrative change. It was intentional, it was calculated, and it was only the beginning of a storm she never asked for, but one she would soon be forced to face. In the days that followed, Emily confirmed what her instincts had already warned her. Nothing that was happening was random. Daniel wasn't reorganizing the company to improve it. He was slowly, methodically removing people who stood in his way, and Emily was at the top of that list. Important meetings began happening without her. Reports that once required her approval were suddenly handled by people with far less experience. Decisions that needed caution were being rushed. What used to be about safety and integrity was now about performance, applause, and pleasing powerful investors. But the most painful part wasn't the exclusion itself. It was the cold, calculated silence. No honest conversation, no explanation, just carefully built distance, just doors quietly closing. She felt as if someone was trying to erase her existence from the company without leaving fingerprints. Michael approached her quietly one afternoon. He lowered his voice, almost as if afraid of the walls listening, and told her that her name had been removed from several technical documents. Sarah, the once energetic analyst, could barely meet Emily's eyes anymore. Fear had settled into everyone. Fear of losing their jobs, fear of being the next target. Even with humiliation pressing heavily on her shoulders, Emily refused to surrender to anger. Experience had taught her something powerful. Shouting rarely changes anything. Truth does. So instead of breaking down, she watched, she listened, she documented. She wrote down dates, conversations, decisions. She gathered everything carefully because she understood something terrifying. This wasn't only about her career. Daniel was altering something critical. Behind the polished speeches about efficiency and future vision, Emily discovered what he was really doing. He was simplifying essential processes to save money. He was removing safety steps, burying risk reports, shaping results to look perfect. The kind of choices that work well in a presentation, but can cause devastation in real life. And Emily knew exactly what was at stake. If that system failed, if someone exploited those weaknesses, it wouldn't just be the company's reputation at risk. Institutions could be affected, people could suffer, lives could be thrown into chaos because someone wanted praise faster than responsibility allowed. Every night, Emily returned home carrying that weight. Sitting in her quiet living room, staring out at the New York skyline, she felt sadness mixing with a different kind of fire inside her, a determination, a refusal to let recklessness win. Still believing that the company would choose reason, she filed an internal complaint. Calmly, professionally, she presented evidence, explained risks, trusted the system. But what she received in return was icy politeness, corporate smiles, pretty words with empty meaning. They told her everything was under control, that she needed to adapt to new leadership, that maybe she was simply too resistant to change. Those words didn't just hurt, they cut deeply. They dismissed her truth. They questioned her integrity. They tried to paint her as the problem instead of the one fighting to prevent disaster. When she returned to her tiny cubicle near the hallway, the loneliness felt heavier than ever. Colleagues avoided her, some out of fear, some out of shame. And for the first time, Emily realized she wasn't just being removed, she was being isolated, erased. But instead of breaking her, that loneliness strengthened her. Something inside Emily shifted. This was no longer simply about defending her reputation. It was about doing what was right, about preventing something truly dangerous. So she did something quietly brave. She looked beyond the company for help. She reached out to people who truly understood the gravity of what was happening, people who didn't care about corporate vanity, but about real consequences. And for the first time in weeks, someone listened, someone believed her, someone treated the situation with the seriousness it deserved. Meanwhile, Daniel walked through the building like a king, confident, admired, untouchable in his own mind. He was preparing a massive presentation, the kind designed to impress everyone who mattered, the kind he believed would make him untouchable forever. He had no idea that the woman he thought he had successfully pushed into a corner was no longer standing defensively in the shadows. She was watching, she was ready, and soon, on the very day he believed would be his greatest triumph, truth would finally step into the room. The day of the big presentation arrived wrapped in an atmosphere that felt almost unreal. The building was spotless, halls polished, floral arrangements placed at key spots, staff walking around with practiced smiles that could not hide the tension in their eyes. Senior executives, powerful partners, and important representatives filled the building. Everything was carefully prepared for one thing: Daniel's moment of glory. And he walked through that space like it already belonged to him. Perfect suit, confident stride, voice rehearsed, certain that he was about to be celebrated. Emily arrived quietly. She wasn't there to fight for pride or attention. She was there because she knew something serious could happen if truth stayed silent. Responsibility brought her there, not ego. As she walked through the same corridors where she once felt respected, memories flooded her. Years of commitment, nights of sacrifice, loyalty given and believed in, now replaced by humiliation and a small gray cubicle. But even carrying that weight, she kept her head high. She had lost space, but not dignity. The presentation room was grand. Large screens, dimmed lighting, every seat taken. A silence filled with expectation hovered in the air. When Daniel saw Emily in the room, his smile hesitated. Just a second, enough to show that somewhere in his confidence lived fear. But he recovered quickly and began speaking. His speech was flawless, emotional, impressive, full of promises of innovation, efficiency, greatness. The audience listened, many nodding, many believing. It was a performance worthy of a stage. Emily watched quietly. She didn't look angry, she looked deeply sad, because she knew those beautiful words were built over something fragile, reckless, dangerous. She knew that part of what he proudly presented shouldn't even exist in that form, and yet there it was, being admired, trusted, applauded. Then came the highlight everyone was waiting for, the live demonstration. Daniel announced it with pride, almost theatrical confidence. This, he promised, will prove everything. The room fell into complete silence, every eye fixed on the massive screen, every breath suspended. Daniel positioned himself proudly at the center of attention and started the system. For a brief moment, everything appeared normal. The screens lit up, the room leaned forward with hope and excitement. But then it happened. The screen froze, the interface collapsed, information disappeared, and in its place appeared a clear, undeniable failure message. Not something he could talk his way out of, not something he could laugh off as a tiny technical glitch. A brutal, visible, undeniable shutdown. The silence was crushing. You could almost feel the collective shock pressing down on the room. Daniel's confident face cracked. First confusion, then worry, then pure panic. He tried again and again, pressed keys, restarted processes, muttered explanations, but nothing responded. The system refused him. The very project he claimed to master no longer obeyed him. Slowly, the expressions around the room began to change. Executives exchanged uneasy glances. Guests stiffened in their seats. Some looked furious, others deeply concerned, others embarrassed to have believed so blindly. Daniel's elegant illusion began to crumble, and the man who had spent months acting untouchable suddenly looked very small, very human, and very afraid. It wasn't only a failure, it was exposure. His confidence had been performative, his leadership was built on shortcuts, his pride now stood under a ruthless spotlight. Emily remained silent. She didn't need to speak. Truth was speaking for her. Truth was on every shocked face. Truth was glowing in red letters on the gigantic screen. Daniel, the man who insisted he was in control, suddenly wasn't in control of anything. His eyes finally turned to the only person in that room he once worked so hard to erase. He didn't look at Emily with arrogance anymore. He didn't look above her. He looked at her with fear, real, undeniable fear, the kind that appears when someone realizes the game is over, the lies are done, and reality is about to demand an answer. And in that overwhelming silence, someone stood up. And what happened next would change everything. What happened next silenced even the smallest whisper. One of the most important representatives in the room stood up and firmly asked for everything to stop. His voice cut through the tension like a blade. This wasn't a request, it was a command. Every screen froze, every movement paused. The presentation was officially over. What remained was not the spectacle Daniel had planned, but the undeniable weight of reality. He looked around the room, slowly, thoughtfully, scanning faces, seeking answers. Then he asked a single, direct question. Who here truly understands this system? The room didn't hesitate. All eyes shifted in the same direction. toward Emily. The moment was powerful. After months of neglect, disrespect, and humiliation, the truth stood clear. When things truly mattered, when something serious was at stake, the only person they trusted was the woman they had tried to erase. Daniel attempted to speak, to defend himself, to claim control again, but his words had lost value. The confidence in his voice was gone. No one believed him anymore. Emily was asked to step forward. She did so with quiet dignity. No triumph in her expression, no revenge, just calm purpose. She sat down, breathed, and explained what was happening. Not angrily, not theatrically, just clearly, honestly, responsibly. She explained what had been removed, what had been ignored, what had been manipulated. She didn't attack, she revealed. She did what truth always does, illuminate. Then came the real challenge. Could she fix it? Could she save what others had damaged? Emily nodded. With steady hands and experienced mind, she worked. She corrected what had been undone, restored what had been erased, rebuilt what reckless ambition had broken. The room watched in absolute silence, and when the system finally came back to life, stable and secure, the feeling wasn't one of applause, it was respect. Deep, genuine respect. Daniel's era ended right there, in front of everyone. The arrogance vanished, the mask collapsed. What stood revealed was irresponsibility, ego, and carelessness. He was confronted, questioned, exposed, and shortly after, removed from his position. No celebration, no ceremony, just the simple, serious consequence of his actions. Emily, however, recovered something priceless, dignity publicly recognized, not because the company gave it back, but because she had never lost it. They had simply tried to bury it. Now, everyone saw clearly who truly carried knowledge, responsibility, and integrity. The company had to admit its failure, and more than that, it had to repair it. They didn't just apologize, they offered her leadership, real leadership, not for image, but because it was right, because she deserved it. The environment changed. People who once avoided her now approached with gratitude and humility. Some apologized with words, others with tears, others with a simple, silent look of respect. Emily accepted the new position, not for power, not for pride, but to protect what she had always defended: safety, honesty, and the responsibility that comes with trust. That night, she returned home quietly. No big celebration, no dramatic triumph. She sat by her window, looked out at the city lights, and felt peace. Peace because she didn't break. Peace because she didn't become bitter. Peace because she proved that truth, even when ignored, doesn't disappear. It waits, and when the time is right, it shines. Stories like this remind us of something important. How many people are unfairly pushed aside just because someone in power decides so? How many times does real talent stand in silence while arrogance takes the spotlight? Maybe that's why Emily's story resonates so deeply, because it proves something essential. Real strength doesn't need to shout. Real worth doesn't fade. And dignity always finds its way back. What about you? Have you witnessed something like this in your life or workplace? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched you, follow the channel for more powerful stories filled with heart, justice, and truth.